Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to a shockingly familiar edition of Mod Madness. You may be wondering why I'm returning to the Max Payne Kung Fu edition so soon after the last video. Well, as it turns out, I managed to miss a few little things here and there, chief of which being an entire leveling system that somehow managed to completely elude me during my original session, and the main reason for that is that I kind of skimmed through a lot of levels in Max Payne. Rather than playing them sequentially, I kind of hopped from part to part to see how the mod affected the gameplay in that particular part of the game. Whereas to really get the full measure of the Kung Fu edition, you need to be playing pretty much sequentially through the levels while using Kung Fu as often as you possibly can. So in some kind of effort to do a little bit of penance on this whole thing, I decided to do a playthrough where I would use Kung Fu as often as humanly possible and try my damnedest to get to the end of the first major part of Max Payne. Essentially, I'd imposed the challenge rule that I'd spoke of in the previous video. I was going to avoid guns where possible and only really use them where it was absolutely necessary to take out an annoying mobster or to move the story forward. Really, I wasn't confident in my skills, as evidenced by the gameplay on screen right now. There was a lot of flipping, flailing, awkward jumps, but still somehow a lot of bullet dodging. Thankfully, the mobsters for the most part here have the same kind of aiming ability as the average Star Wars stormtrooper. The other benefit to playing like this is that it'd also give me a pretty clear idea of how long it actually takes to access that level up and gain those extra abilities. If I'm going to be honest, it wasn't really very long until I started regretting my adherence to the challenge rules I'd imposed on myself. This section in particular proved an especially difficult early bottleneck. You've got essentially a corridor with a lot of goons at the other end, all shooting at you, combined with a few easily triggered gas canisters as well, and you've got yourself a recipe for pretty bad time. If anything though, I managed to view situations like these as valuable learning experiences to see how the Kung Fu system can be negatively impacted by certain kinds of level geometry. The tracks here, for example, and even the sides of the train tracks, meant that a lot of my hits that I tried to land, especially with flying kicks, would occasionally fall wide of the mark, instead forcing me to rely on a lot of flippy shit and the occasional intervention of RNG, because thankfully it can indeed be possible to sometimes bait these dumbasses into shooting their allies, and it's just more of a case of being able to capitalize on moments like that to get you out of these tricky situations. As for the question of when I actually acquired my first Kung Fu level up, I'd say that happened around about 5 or 6 minutes into this level after using nothing but Kung Fu to take my enemies down. What actually confused me slightly, however, was the fact that I'd moved past this part. I'd completed it previously, gone on to the train track section that you'd just seen, and had to reload an earlier save file because I hadn't got it in my head that I need to hit the quick save button more often yet. So I replayed this part. Did the same thing I did last time, beat the crap out of them, but the only difference was when I actually brought them down, I actually got the level up screen this time, which threw me for a little bit of a loop. Did this mean that XP carried on, even with a reloaded save? I erred on the side of probably not. One thing that could have certainly cleared up this confusion, however, would have been the presence of an EXP gauge on screen, just to show you how much progress you need to make before you reach that level up, or in my case, actually let you know that there's even a level up system in play. In terms of how far you can go with the level up system, it actually tops out at level 4, and through nothing but Kung Fu gameplay, I averaged about 1 level up per chapter, which, to be honest, isn't really all that bad going. But by fully maxing out Max, your combos will be as powerful as they can be, and you'll have access to the full suite of skills, which include the wall run and the wall jump, which are fairly self-explanatory moves, as well as the takedown, which is the final skill unlock. And the point of contention I have with that final skill is, firstly, I don't know what the takedown move is, And secondly, I don't know how to perform it because, well, it didn't tell me. In fact, I found myself having to do a little bit of digging on the ModDB page to actually find something that lays out a lot of the deeper aspects of the Kung Fu Edition combat. One aspect that I was particularly interested to read about was the concept of buffering, which is a technique that you can use here to extend a combo but direct it at a different enemy by utilizing the crouch button. And after reading through a fair few of those paragraphs and trying to absorb what they had to say, I kind of figured that it was a lot more effort than it was worth to pull off. Sticking to the basics though, I feel like after giving this a bit more of a first shake and going all in on the Kung Fu system, I certainly had a little bit more fun with it than I did last time. It also gave me a good opportunity to experience some amusing bugs that I may have not had the chance to otherwise. For example, in this very room, one of these mobsters is not what he seems. I'll give you a little moment to see if you can spot it, but by now, you'd assume that this guy would be knocked the fuck out. Instead, he just refuses to go down. No matter how many moves or combos I fling in his particular direction, he just shrugs it off. He stays standing, and as a result, he became a little bit of a nemesis for me during this section. I mean, I could take out the rest of the guys in the room fairly easily, but when it came to dealing with him, I wasn't entirely sure where I stood. Actually, no, I knew exactly where I stood. Nowhere, because I was face down in a puddle of my own blood. So how exactly did I resolve this situation? Well, I ran away. I ran like a bitch. Because when you're confronted by an unstoppable killing machine, you just get in the goddamn elevator and just forget that whole thing ever happened. My absolute favorite bug had to be when I was chasing down Vinny Gogniti and things went a little different from, I guess, how the game expected things to go. So this cutscene has Vinny jump onto a train nearby and Max fires a few bullets, only this time round he actually kills him, which the game just doesn't know how to deal with. It just stays on that scene until you quit back out of it, because you essentially create a time paradox, because that character is supposed to be alive in Max Payne 2, so yeah, that gave me a chuckle. I'd still say a few of my criticisms from the original video still stand. I still feel like there's some sections of the actual campaign that could stand to have a few gun-wielding goons removed and maybe replaced with melee enemies instead. Basically, I feel like work could be done here to make the Kung Fu Edition feel like a better fit with the actual gameplay of Max Payne. That hasn't really changed for me. The actual way of performing Kung Fu in the game as well still feels a little clunky to me. The way you execute combos, the way you can move between them seems just a tad overcomplicated. I feel like additional work could be done to make that whole Kung Fu interface a little bit more player-friendly. And when it comes to actually landing hits with Kung Fu, I occasionally get the sense that the hitboxes are not exactly aligned in my favor. If I had to pick the biggest sin of the Max Payne Kung Fu Edition, however, it would be the fact that even after you've unlocked the wall jump and the wall run, you can't actually use them in conjunction with your guns. I mean, come on, that one is obvious. That could be one of the most badass things you could include in a mod like this, but no, it's exclusive to the Kung Fu. You can't fire your guns while doing that really awesome wall-based flippy shit, and just a bit of a shame, really. Anyway, you're probably wondering how I got on with my self-imposed Kung Fu challenge, and I actually managed to get all the way to Ragnarok using only my feet and my fists and the occasional bout of hitting people over the head with a stick. I stuck to my guns. Wait, actually no, that doesn't work. If I stuck to my guns, I'd probably be using them. I stuck to my fists. Actually, that doesn't sound good either. That'd mean they'd be glued together and I wouldn't be able to use them. I did it, alright? I got all the way to Ragnarok, and Ragnarok was the level that caused me to just give up. What was it exactly that caused me to throw in the towel? Well, it was a combination of factors, really. Chief of which being kung fu fatigue. At this point, I had retried certain sections so many times that I was just starting to feel a little bit numb. The fun of the idea had long since kind of drained, and I was really feeling the itch, the need to reach for a trigger, the need to let a few bullets fly. The other contributing factor was just some of the enemy placement. Not that it was excessively awkward, it's just that in Ragnarok you get a few balconies with enemies on them that can take pot shots at you, chuck molotovs. There's a backstage segment where there's a fairly considerable run-up between you and the nearest enemy that you can kick in the face, and that was a little awkward. And, like I said, at this point it was mostly just fatigue. Overall, though, I'm pretty happy I came back for a second look. I managed to reaffirm some of my opinions on the mod, I managed to discover a few new things about the mod, and more importantly, I managed to address that significant issue with the last video where I completely managed to avoid experiencing or talking about the Kung Fu level up system. Much like last time, however, if you're interested in giving this a whirl for yourself, the link, as usual, is in the description below. While I'm at it, I'd also like to give a great big thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so very much for your contributions, and thank you for helping to make content like this possible. If you're interested in helping to support the channel yourself, you can find the link to my Patreon page also in the description below. In any case, I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mods you'd like to see me cover in future episodes of Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.